Have you ever been, um, like, so incredibly good at your job that you finally land that massive promotion you've been working toward, only to wake up a few months later feeling like you are completely and utterly failing?
Yeah, I mean, it is a surprisingly universal experience, especially for high achievers.
Right.
It's like a trap.
Exactly. You
Yep.
hit this invisible wall where, every single instinct and habit that historically guaranteed your success suddenly just stops working. Or worse, it starts actively working against you.
And that dynamic is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We're pulling from a really fascinating piece called Leading the Leaders, the Regional Director Transition.
Yes, specifically focusing on passage 3, which is the shift from center director to regional director.
Right, so we're going to walk through this by looking at a leader named Emma.
Hmm.
She's a rock star center director at a fictional childcare company called Bright Beginnings. And I mean, her statistics are undeniable.
Oh, she's crushing it.
Totally. She runs a building with 98% enrollment. She boasts the absolute lowest staff turnover in the entire company. Wow.
Parent satisfaction scores are through the roof. And her leadership bench is so deep that her assistant director was actually just recently promoted to run a completely different location.
Right, so she has essentially mastered her domain. I mean, from an operational standpoint, she is the gold standard for a frontline leader.
Naturally, the executive team notices this, right?
Hmm.
The current regional director of Texas gets bumped up to vice president, and Emma gets the tap on the shoulder.
Which is huge.
It is. She is promoted to oversee 12 centers across Texas. We are talking Dallas, Plano, Frisco, McKinney, Allen, that entire surrounding area.
And she's probably thrilled.
Oh, she is thrilled. Her immediate thought is, I'm going to multiply everything I've learned. I'll just do what I did in my individual center,
Yeah.
but I'll do it times 12.
Oh, boy. And see, that specific multiplication mindset, that is the exact trap that catches so many newly promoted leaders.
It catches her really fast because within 3 months, she is absolutely exhausted and she genuinely feels like she is drowning.
Yeah, the wheels fall off quickly.
So our mission for you, the listener, in this deep dive, is to unpack exactly why top performers like Emma stumble so hard when they try to scale their leadership.
And how to successfully navigate that brutal shift from building a great product or a great center to building great leaders.
Because it is not a subtle shift.
No, not at all. It requires a complete rewiring of your professional instincts.
Let's look at what the source material calls the third promotion trap.
Mm.
Emma's first 3 months in this new role, I mean, they just sound like an administrative nightmare.
Just brutal.
Yeah. Every Monday, she is in her car driving to a different center. By Wednesday, she is rolling up her sleeves and personally fixing staffing issues at like 3 different locations.
Right, because she knows how to do it.
Exactly. She's physically reorganizing classrooms because she knows how they should look. She's directly coaching the teachers, and she's even sitting down to help one center director rewrite their entire localized enrollment strategy.
And by Friday, she has absolutely nothing left in the tank. She is totally burnt out. But, the real tragedy of this scenario isn't just her burnout. It's that despite all of her heroic effort, the overall performance metrics of her region aren't moving an inch.
Wait, really? After all that work?
Yeah, she is working harder than she has in her entire life, and she is getting nowhere.
Wow. Which I guess leads to this pivotal reality check. One afternoon, the vice president who promoted her sits her down and asks a very simple yet devastating question.
Oh, this part is so good.
They ask, Emma, which of your 12 center directors has become significantly better because of your leadership?
Ouch. And the silence that follows that question, that's the turning point for her.
Because she couldn't answer it.
Right. She couldn't answer because her metric for success was entirely wrong.
She realizes she'd been running around improving individual centers, but she hadn't improved a single center director.
Exactly. And that realization sparks the core thesis of this entire transition. The premise here is that center directors build centers, but regional directors build center directors.
That is a massive identity shift.
It's fundamental. Emma has to abandon the very identity that earned her the promotion in the first place. She has to let go of, I run an outstanding childcare center, and adopt, I build outstanding center directors who each run exceptional centers.
Which means her actual list of responsibilities completely changes.
Yeah, notice what disappears entirely from her list.
The building itself. She doesn't own a building anymore. She owns leadership capability.
Yeah. But, I want to push back on this a little bit, because if I put myself in Emma's shoes,
Sure.
stepping entirely away from the actual product feels incredibly risky. If I am accountable to the VP for the region's numbers, stepping back from the day-to-day operations feels like career suicide.
It definitely feels that way.
I mean, to bring in an outside analogy, it reminds me of Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
He is arguably the greatest hockey player to ever live, but when he transitioned to being a head coach, he struggled.
Right, because playing the game and coaching the game are entirely different skill sets. Exactly. So as a high performer, how do you justify taking your hands off the stick when the game is actually on the line?
Well, it feels risky because you are giving up direct control, right? But the research argues that maintaining that control is actually the much bigger risk.
How so?
Your Gretzky analogy is spot on. If Gretzky jumps on the ice during a game he is coaching to score a goal himself, the team might win that single game.
Sure, because he's Gretzky.
Right. But the players never learn how to run the offense themselves. The material explains that if you, as the regional leader, are still operating the center, if you are still chopping the onions or teaching the classes or doing the marketing, you are actively stealing the growth opportunity from the local leader.
Oh, wow. Actively stealing it.
Yeah. Every single time Emma reorganizes a classroom herself, she is robbing that center director of the chance to learn how to identify a disorganized classroom and fix it.
So you aren't ensuring quality, you are just creating a regional bottleneck where everything relies on your personal intervention.
Precisely. You become a rescuer rather than a developer.
And rescuing solves the problem for today, but developing solves the problem for tomorrow.
Exactly.
Okay, so if Emma can no longer rely on her old hands-on skills, like if she can't just jump in and fix the classrooms, what is she supposed to be looking at when she visits a location?
That's the big question.
Because how does she figure out what's going wrong if she isn't evaluating the product? The framework in the source introduces this mental model called the 12 mirrors.
Yeah, it's a completely different diagnostic approach.
So the story goes, Emma's mentor takes her on a center visit to help her adjust. Emma walks into the building, and her eyes instinctively go to the classroom bulletin boards.
Because that's what she knows.
Right. She evaluates the curriculum, she watches the transitions between activities, she even starts counting the child-to-staff ratios in the hallway.
Classic center director behavior.
And her mentor just leans in and whispers, wrong level.
I love that part. Because she is still diagnosing the physical classroom. She is looking at the symptom, not the system.
Right. He tells her, don't evaluate the classrooms, evaluate the center director.
Which requires a massive cognitive shift. When you walk into a location as a regional leader, your initial questions shouldn't be about bulletin boards or curriculum at all.
So what should they be?
Well, the material outlines the exact internal questions Emma needs to be asking. How is this director coaching their own staff? How are they making complex decisions? Do they have a successor in place if they leave tomorrow? Are they solving problems themselves, or are they effectively solving them through others?
Right, and the mentor explains this by saying that every single center reflects its center director, and every center director reflects Emma.
Yes. That is why they are called the 12 mirrors.
Right. If a center is constantly chaotic, it's because the director isn't managing chaos.
And if the director isn't managing chaos, it's because Emma hasn't developed them with the tools to do so. Everything rolls up.
That makes a lot of sense. But that leads to how a leader at this level actually diagnoses problems at scale. Because finding the root cause has to be much harder when you are a step removed.
It is. It's a totally different muscle.
Let's talk about that diagnostic process.
Yeah.
The material gives a scenario where one of the centers is struggling heavily with enrollment.
A classic problem.
Yeah. And old Emma, wearing her center director hat, would have seen low enrollment numbers and immediately jumped into marketing mode.
Oh, she'd be looking at ad spend, community flyers, conversion rates, all of it.
Exactly. But new Emma, the regional director, has to stop herself. She determines the symptom is enrollment, but the actual problem might be leadership.
Right.
But practically speaking, how does a leader train themselves to see past that loud, flashing, red alert symptom like low enrollment to find the quiet, underlying leadership issue? I mean, it goes against all that built-up muscle memory.
Well, it requires unlearning that muscle memory by forcing yourself to ask entirely different diagnostic questions. The framework shows Emma shifting her focus from individual operational metrics to evaluating organizational health.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Instead of asking about the ad spend, she asks, is the leadership team in this building actually aligned? Is high staff turnover creating an environment of instability that parents are subconsciously noticing during tours?
Oh, that's interesting. So the parents pick up on the bad vibe.
Exactly. Is low educator morale directly affecting the warmth of the parent experience? She is no longer coaching educators on how to speak to prospective parents.
Right.
Instead, she is sitting down with the directors and asking them, what leadership challenges are keeping you awake at night?
What is keeping you awake at night?
Yeah.
That simple question shifts the burden of problem solving right back onto the director's shoulders where it belongs.
100%.
So we've established the psychological shift in how Emma needs to think. But, thinking differently doesn't actually mean anything if you don't change how you physically spend your day.
Oh, your calendar's the ultimate lie detector.
The ultimate lie detector. I love that.
It's true. It reflects your true priorities, regardless of what you say your priorities are.
And the side-by-side calendar comparison in the source is jarring. I mean, take a moment and think about your own calendar this week, right? How much of your time is spent doing the job you were promoted out of versus the job you were hired to do?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
Emma's old center director calendar was full of parent meetings, licensing walkthroughs, staff scheduling, classroom observation.
Daily hiring interviews.
Right. But her new regional director calendar is entirely different. It's coaching center directors, regional strategy planning, financial reviews, leadership succession modeling.
And capital planning. But what really stands out is what is missing from that new list. The day-to-day operations are just completely gone.
Yeah, the material notes that she barely enters classrooms anymore,
Mm-hmm.
which I imagine initially feels incredibly uncomfortable for someone who built their entire career inside those classrooms.
Oh, it has to feel wrong.
And the ideal time allocation they suggest is almost unbelievable when you compare it to a frontline manager. They recommend 35% of her time should be dedicated solely to coaching her center directors,
Right.
20% on regional strategy and planning, and they cap crisis management at just 5%. 5%.
Which means 95% of her professional life is supposed to be proactive rather than reactive.
That is wild. And getting to that 5% crisis management requires what the material calls the hardest lesson.
Yes,
Yeah,
this part is crucial.
I really want to walk through this specific anecdote because the friction in it is just so palpable. A center director calls Emma in an absolute panic.
Total meltdown.
Yeah, 3 educators had just called in sick, and the center's about to fall out of legal operating ratios.
Which is a huge deal in childcare.
A massive deal.
Mm-hmm.
So old Emma's instinct is to open her navigation app, key in the address, and drive over to cover a classroom herself. That is her superpower.
She wants to be the hero.
Right. But new Emma catches herself. Instead of grabbing her car keys, she asks the panicked director on the phone, "What options have you considered?"
And there's just dead silence on the other end of the line.
Literally nothing.
Because the director completely expects Emma to save them.
The director finally stammers, "I hadn't thought about that. I just called you." And Emma, sitting quietly in her office, just regulates her own breathing and says, "I'll stay on the phone with you. You solve it."
That is so hard to do.
It is. And 2 hours later, the director calls back. They figured it out. They shuffled some schedules, called a temp agency, and survived the morning.
And Emma never left her office.
Never left. But reading that scenario, I felt a visceral reaction. Sitting in an office doing quote-unquote nothing while your team is in a full-blown operational panic, it must feel incredibly negligent in the moment.
It absolutely feels like negligence. You feel like a bad leader.
Right. It feels like you are abandoning your team when they need you most.
But the framework frames this perfectly. It poses a critical question for the leader. In that moment, are you managing your own anxiety or are you developing your people?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Rushing over to save the day relieves Emma's anxiety, but it teaches the director absolutely nothing.
That is such a good point.
The core lesson here is that every single problem you solve for a center director is a problem they never learn to solve themselves.
Which goes back to the Gretzky analogy.
Exactly. Tolerating that short-term discomfort, forcing yourself to sit in the silence on the phone while your subordinate struggles to find an answer, is absolutely mandatory if you want to build long-term leadership capacity.
Because by choosing not to get in her car, Emma forced that center director to become permanently stronger.
She did.
Okay, so if a leader at this level isn't fighting those daily fires anymore, and they aren't getting those immediate, localized hits of dopamine from solving a staffing crisis, what do they actually value at the end of the day?
Right, the reward system has to change.
The material points out that this was Emma's final and perhaps biggest transformation, shifting her core work values.
She has to move from valuing isolated excellence to valuing a cohesive leadership network.
Because before, she valued a single great center, her center. Now she has to value consistency.
Yes.
A parent should have the exact same high-quality experience, whether they drop their kid off in Dallas, Plano, Frisco, or McKinney.
And that consistency across 12 locations becomes vastly more valuable than one isolated pocket of perfection.
Which completely alters how she approaches problem solving. Instead of trying to fix one broken center in a vacuum, she focuses on cross-center learning.
Right. She looks at her region's metrics and sees that, say, center number 3 has almost zero staff turnover, while center number 8 is just hemorrhaging staff.
So rather than driving to Center 8 to investigate and fix it herself,
She asks, how do I extract whatever center 3 is doing and replicate it everywhere else?
that specific mindset culminates in a massive turning point in the narrative. The parent company launches a statewide enrollment initiative.
Which is usually a top-down nightmare.
Exactly. Historically, headquarters would just draft a strategy in a boardroom and dictate it down to the individual centers to execute.
Yeah.
But Emma approaches it differently. She gathers all 12 of her center directors in one room, puts the goal on the whiteboard, and just asks, what are your best enrollment ideas?
She stops trying to be the smartest person in the room, and she starts leveraging the collective intelligence of the leaders she has built.
And the room just comes alive. One director outlines a brilliant open house strategy they've been testing quietly. Another shares a set of follow-up phone scripts that have been converting at a really high rate.
Someone else has established local community partnerships.
Yes. Within 6 months, enrollment rises across the entire board. Not because Emma had a single brilliant answer, but because she built an environment where these leaders could learn from each other.
She built the network.
Exactly. She essentially turned 12 isolated islands into a single, interconnected supercomputer. She didn't need to hold all the data, she just needed to build the infrastructure.
And that is the textbook definition of scaling leadership. And, the source material doesn't just leave this as some abstract concept.
Right, it gives a plan.
Yeah, it provides a very practical 6-month development timeline for anyone trying to implement this model and actually survive the transition.
Let's break down that timeline for the listener because the sequence really matters here.
It does.
So, month 1 is described as brutal but necessary. Your only goal in month 1 is to stop fixing operational issues.
You have to stop coaching the frontline educators. You transition entirely to doing monthly coaching sessions with your directors and holding quarterly talent reviews.
But I imagine month 1 is just agonizing. Letting small things drop, letting a center slightly underperform for a few weeks while the local director figures it out, that has to be incredibly painful for a perfectionist.
Oh, it's super painful, which is why month 1 is solely about behavioral restraint. You are basically breaking your own habits.
Right, and then once you create that space, months 2 and 3 are about establishing regional standards.
Yeah, you identify those high-performing locations, you ask what they are doing differently, and you build the operational systems to replicate those specific practices across the whole region.
You are building that supercomputer network.
Exactly.
And then months 4 through 6 are entirely focused on the future, ensuring every single center director has a documented succession plan, ongoing leadership coaching, and what the framework calls a ready now assistant director.
Someone who could take over tomorrow if necessary.
Which perfectly brings us to the core essence of this entire analysis. The material provides one summarizing thought that pulls all of this together. It says, as a regional director, your job is no longer to create one exceptional childcare center. Your job is to build a community of exceptional center directors who develop outstanding leaders, create consistent family experiences, and produce sustainable results across every single location.
It perfectly outlines the ultimate career progression, doesn't it? You start by doing the work, then you transition to developing the people who do the work.
Right.
And eventually, if you scale high enough, you are developing the people who develop the people.
But looking closely at that heavy emphasis on succession planning in the final months, this strict mandate that every director must have a ready-now replacement trained and waiting, it actually leaves me with a lingering thought.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredibly aggressive stance on building talent pipelines. And it actually sets up a fascinating and somewhat provocative question for you to mull over as you navigate your own career progression.
I like where this is going.
The underlying argument here is that a leader's greatest possible accomplishment isn't opening a new location or hitting a quarterly target. It's watching one of their directors successfully mentor a future director without their involvement at all.
It's about making leadership entirely self-replicating.
Exactly. So for you listeners stepping into higher, more complex levels of leadership, if your ultimate goal is to build this perfectly self-replicating machine of independent, capable leaders who can diagnose and solve their own problems, at what point does a truly master-level regional director effectively make themselves entirely obsolete?
Wow. If the machine runs itself perfectly, do they even need you anymore?
Right. If you do your job perfectly, are you out of a job? That is just a fantastic thought to leave on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. As you look at your own calendar this week, if you've recently been promoted and you feel like you are failing, consider that you might not be failing. You simply haven't shifted your identity yet. Take some time to look into your own 12 mirrors and ask yourself honestly if you're still trying to touch the dough or if you're finally ready to build the chef. Until next time, keep diving deep.